Good morning, everybody. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to both Retief Ferreira and Vinesh Maharaj. As you can see, Retief is the head of supply chain. Whoops, gone. Supply chain and procurement at PwC, and Vinesh is the smart lead for manufacturing. If you could all give them a very big hand and warm welcome, thank you.
This is working. Thanks all. Thank you for coming. I was very much looking forward to that grand introduction with the music and see my name up in lights. So unfortunately that couldn't happen today. And even dropping the mic after the presentation wouldn't have the same effect with this thing on. So I'll just do my best. My whole preparation's gone out the window. So my name's Retief Ferreira, and I head up our supply chain and procurement team in PwC, South Africa. I'm also about to be, in a couple of weeks from now, the father of 5 kids. So 5 kids under the age of 5. So you can consider me as a production expert. But I'm of the old-fashioned type. I believe in efficiency and the least amount of customization. So there are 2 sets of twins in there, and they're all daughters. So if you want to talk about smart manufacturing, I suggest you speak to Vinesh about that. So before I returned to South Africa 3 years ago to build our supply chain practice, I spent 10 years in our London office, predominantly focusing on transforming the operating models of consumer and industrial product companies. And then had a fantastic opportunity to come back to South Africa. And I've enjoyed every single minute of it. It's extremely challenging, but massively rewarding as well. So over there, we predominantly focused on transforming the operating models for companies that wanted to integrate across Europe or even globally, which, as you can imagine, was a massive task. Back in the day, it wasn't that easy. We were still stuck in the age-old systems of ERP systems and trying to integrate systems and data, which was massively challenging. I think today it is much easier. So digital in Africa is a fascinating topic. Over the last couple of days, we've had a number of presentations on digital. I found Sean Cully's presentation yesterday absolutely fascinating. It was the cutting edge of things, where the world's going. But to be honest, I found it slightly daunting. I don't know how you felt about it. Watching those robots, it was, like I said, really fascinating. But I sat there thinking to myself, oh crap, what does this mean? Will I even be relevant in 5 or 10 years from now? What will happen to my kids? Will they even have a job? I hope the robots pay taxes. So we find digital and digital transformation a topic that's coming up more frequently with our clients. And we find basic questions, really. What is Industry 4.0? Is it still 4? Is it now 5? Is it 6? What does it mean for our company? When do we think we'll hit Africa? So we thought that would be a really relevant topic for you. So it's fantastic to see so many faces in the room. When I saw we were up against a survivor, next door I thought we were done. We were going to have an empty room. So thank you. We know you had a choice of quite a few sessions to go to, so it's fantastic to see so many faces. I'll ask Vinesh to introduce himself. He's a smart lead.
Thank you, Retief. So I'm an electronic engineer, and I've spent the better part of my life automating factories around Africa, using various types of control systems. Then around 2002, I decided to understand the business a bit better, did an MBA, and got involved in management information systems, moved on to manufacturing information systems. And now at PwC, we help our clients carve out strategies that help them make their products faster, better, and cheaper. So I'm no way as interesting as Retief here because I'm smart and I have 0 children because I think that's a smart thing to do considering school fees. and my production line is not as good. But back to you, Retief.
But it's smart, Vinesh. It's smart. I can clearly do with some artificial intelligence. I'm also an electronics engineer, so by the way, but I never say that because I'm always scared people will ask me difficult questions. And I'll just divert it back to Vinesh. So is Africa ready for digital? Now, clearly that's a question that begs for a subjective answer. And today you'll walk away with your own subjective answer, and we're hoping that our presentation can give you enough information to form your own opinion, really. I have my own opinion. And we bring it back to home, back to Africa, make it real, to see how Africa is embracing technology to overcome what might seem as very basic problems to a lot of people. But these are things that wouldn't have been possible 5 or 10 years ago. So we really find it interesting, and we hope so do you. So to answer that question, can we break the question up into 2 parts? Because digital in Africa is not something we use every day in one sentence. So let's start with Africa. What do you think about when someone says Africa? There are many different opinions. So if you Google the stereotypical image of Africa, this is one of the first ones that come up. Literally, whoops, my mic just dropped. Now, if you look at that, there's clearly no sign of innovation or technology. And a lot of people, especially, I guess, the South African audience in current times, might think corruption, unemployment, poverty, we backwards. For those of you sort of more positively inclined, you might think of a vibrant culture, vibrant people finding very practical ways of overcoming basic problems, like the Hippo roller, to transport large quantities of water across the land. It's a land of opportunity, it's untapped potential, and reality is so is digital. It's still emerging, it's still evolving. No one really knows where it's going. There are loads of videos out there, and it's fantastic, but we actually don't know. And it really is a subjective thing, and it depends on your point of view. In my personal opinion, I think the word disruption is used ad nauseum. If I drive down the N1 in Joburg, you see disruption all over the place, disrupting your own business model, disrupting your competitors. And in reality, disruption is actually just a form of evolution. Yes, sure, the pace of evolution is much faster than it used to be. The image of Minesweeper always comes up in my mind, where you press one block, and then a whole lot opens up. And that's really the phase that we're going through, is this rapid pace of evolution. And it is happening quickly. I'm a mere 40 years old. I'm an electronic engineer, but I'm not even considered a digital native. I only got my first mobile phone when I was in my 3rd year of university. Before that, my folks had to call me on the Tiki Box. So if you're not from South Africa, it's a great conversation starter over lunch to ask someone what a Tiki Box is. But yet my 2-year-old daughter navigates an iPhone like it's the most natural thing in the world. And I believe that's what's happening to us. So what's disruption today and what's wow today will be the norm tomorrow. And that's the way we will live our lives. And Africa is embracing that. Africa is also evolving, both in terms of technology, but also in terms of our mindsets and the way we think about things. So you might have heard about the concept of cities of the future. So we have our own cities of the future in Africa. I wanted to just show a couple of examples. One is Nairobi, which is considered as Africa's most intelligent city. And in terms of the technology that they're embracing, they've built technology hubs in the center. International businesses now consider Nairobi as the HQ of Africa, as opposed to Joburg or Cape Town. And they found a way to really integrate technology through mobile phones for people to integrate their living and working lives. An example to demonstrate the change in mindset of African cities is Kigali in Rwanda. So as you might know, until 20 years ago, there was a genocide in Rwanda. And they're rebuilding the city of Kigali. It's now considered the cleanest city in Africa. They're investing millions into sustainable and affordable infrastructure that's accessible for all walks of life. They banned the importation of single-use plastic bags. And incidentally said it's Tanzania in the last couple of weeks. And there's a massive fine for anyone caught with a single-use plastic bag, even more so for people manufacturing it. And in Kigali, they actually dedicate a day a month to full walks of life to clean up the city. And to me, that was just a fantastic example of how the mindset is changing, because we don't really think about things, and we put it past us in Africa. So let's look at the statistics to see if that will help us answer this question. So a couple of years ago, we did a study in Africa as PwC to see how the continent's embracing technology, how we're using it, and there were clear signs that we adopt technology as a continent. So the mobile growth rate over the last 9 years was 334% in Africa, as opposed to 107% in the rest of the world. So yes, you may argue that's off a low base, and it's a very valid argument, but it does show that we are adopting the technologies and we are using it in our everyday lives, as can be seen in 2/3 of Nigerians having shopped online already. That they do that to overcome security issues, not being mugged in the street, to overcome basic infrastructure challenges. And so looking forward, 50% of the world's population growth is forecasted to come from Africa. Now that in itself, in isolation, is not a fantastic statistic, because people might think, oh, it's only going to aggravate our unemployment and poverty. But if you couple that to the forecasted GDP growth to outstrip the population growth, it means our GDP per capita will be much greater than it is today. Coupled with the investments in technology, with more than 300 technology hubs across Africa to focus and foster innovation, that is quite interesting. So if you connect those dots and you have quite a positive outlook, you might say we're looking at the next economic growth engine of the world, and it's forecasted that Africa will surpass China, especially if you consider that there's still relative affordable cost of employment or labor cost, and not quite unlimited, but fantastic access to natural resources. On the other hand, we still lack very basic infrastructure in terms of digital. So only 82% of the population has got access to mobile connections. Now, mobile connection in this instance is the very basic function of making a telephone call or sending a text message. Only 34% of the population has access to the internet, as compared to in the 80% for other continents. Now, that can probably be explained by the fact that not many people have access to a computer or a laptop, so they in all likelihood will access the internet through a smartphone. Now, the prohibitive cost of a smartphone, coupled with the prohibitive cost of data in Africa, is a massive problem that we need to overcome if we really want to transform the continent from a digital perspective. So even with this, there are two sides to the coin. They're fantastic, encouraging statistics, but then in terms of infrastructure, we lack the very basics. So what we want to cover for you today is really, and this is 101, especially after the last couple of days of presentations, is demystify what we mean with digital supply chain or connected supply chain. We want to look at how people in Africa embrace technology to find solutions around everyday challenges. And then Vinesh will take us through the journey of what it takes to become a digital champion, no matter where you are on the maturity curve. And he'll also share an example of what we've done with a client recently to do that. So what do we mean by digital supply chain? So if you'll indulge me, I just want to spend a minute on a couple of definitions. So digital is definitely not about technology. And that's the first question that we get from our clients is, what technology is out there? What should I use? It's not about the technology. It's about finding new ways to solve problems. It's about finding new ways to create differentiating user experiences and customer experiences. And it's about forming collaboration across the supply chain. And ultimately, it's really about accelerating business performance. And then the second question we get is, what is digitization and what is digitalization? So digitization is really in its truest form the process of taking something that's analog and converting it into a digital format. So a very simple example is to scan a paper document into your computer. Now, ironically, I spoke to the partner who led our forensics audit in Steinhoff, and he said, if that forensics audit was done 5 or 10 years ago, it would have taken a team of hundreds of forensics consultants somewhere between 10 and 20 years to come to a conclusion on that audit. They had more than 20 million documents to go through and review. So luckily, in today's age, most of it's digitized in the form of email or scanned documents. And we actually built robots to do process analysis and connect themes and dots. And at the end of the day, they came up with 5 threads that they had to follow through those 20 million documents, mostly through robots and data analysis. And that allowed them to do it within a year as opposed to 10 or 20 years. Most of us would have been dead by the time they got to a conclusion. Digitalization really is about transforming your business model into a new digital model. Sean mentioned yesterday that the data really is the new currency. So people find all ways of creating new revenue streams through digital means and creating new digital products and new digital services to their customers. You really have to drive both digitization and digitalization in order to fully transform your business and your supply chain. Connected supply chains. Just take a quick look at the traditional supply chain. Clearly, it's disconnected entities in a chain where products and information flow in a series of discrete, disconnected steps, forwards and backwards. Now, clearly, that's not a very efficient way of doing things. So, ultimately, digitalization is, well, unless you can defy the laws of physics, you cannot really integrate that system. People like Amazon have managed to do it, but through vertical and horizontal integration. They've been very successful at it, but most companies aren't able to do that. So they use digital means to create a virtual ecosystem where everyone is connected, from the supplier down to the customer. Now, if you can manage to do that, and this is really the concept of it, it means supply and demand signals can originate anywhere in your supply chain and be simultaneously available to all players in the supply chain. Now, with that level of transparency, you won't only be able to react to disruption in your supply chain, but ultimately you can predict it and proactively plan for it with all your stakeholders in the supply chain. And that really is what we're trying to achieve through what we call connected supply chains or digital supply chains. Now, what's the business, the benefits of it and the business value that it brings? If you in Skalk's presentation just before this, he spoke a lot about governance in the supply chain and visibility. Now, if you have visibility and transparency throughout your supply chain, you obviously have much better governance. You have much better reliability. Connecting all the different entities in the supply chain, there are massive efficiency gains to be had. Our supply chains as they are today are massively ineffective and inefficient parts of the value chain. We lose a lot of value and a lot of cost in that. And then ultimately through data-driven insights, we can turn our supply chains into customer-centric supply chains, which is the ultimate goal. Companies, especially consumer product companies, will soon not be able to compete on price or products anymore. Most things are becoming commoditized. So the real way of differentiating yourselves is through a differentiated customer experience, and that is what that will allow you to do. So let's have a look at how is Africa keeping up. In Africa, our supply chains face what aren't unique challenges, but they're more common in Africa than in other parts of the world. So first off is lack of security. There's also a talk, I think it's right now, earlier, about counterfeit drugs that make their way into our supply chains and markets. There's a lack of connectivity in Africa. So we're a continent of different cultures, different languages, different currencies. We have hard borders between the countries, unlike Europe. Which means inherently we are a disconnected continent. We have this tension in our culture. Are we a socialist state or are we a capitalist state? Our economic regulations and policies don't particularly make it an easy place to do business. We have a massive skill shortage, and not even to talk about very basic infrastructure that we don't have in the continent. So I just quickly want to take you through a few examples of how companies and people in Africa have embraced technology to overcome these basic things. So first of all, the security thing with counterfeit drugs. Now, counterfeit drugs, I see David's in the audience who's working at the Department of Health for us, is a massive and long-standing and deadly problem in Africa. The biggest issue is that there are varying levels of API in the drugs. So some of them are placebo, there's no API in the drug. Others have little bits and others have way more than that. So the end consumer doesn't really know what he's getting. So a company called Sproxel, it's an American-based company, has developed a very simple solution where users can now take the drugs that they buy, whether it be in informal market or the formal market, and they text the code, and the drug's authenticated, saying whether it's real or not. And it gives you a bit more product information on that as well. So that was a very neat solution to overcome a massive problem in Africa. Secondly, and this is the point about culture. Are we socialists? Are we capitalists? Do we live from hand to mouth? What not many people know is in Kenya, more than 90% of food for the country is produced by smallholder farmers. More than 60% in Nigeria, which is the most populous country in Africa, is produced by smallholder farmers. Now, clearly, these guys aren't very very advanced in their ways of agriculture and their ways of farming. So Zenvis and Ujuzi Kilimo have developed an application where that allow these farmers to test and analyze the soil data. And based on the analysis, they give them recommendations on how to increase the yield of their crops, how to better and more effectively apply fertilizer. Now that had a massive impact on the economy of those small societies, and obviously also on the supply of a stable food source. Zipline, I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And if you're not, do yourself a favor and go onto YouTube. There are fascinating videos about it. So that's in Rwanda and Ghana, where a company called Zipline is making use of, and they're actually making use of drones to deliver critical medicines and devices to previously inaccessible areas that might have taken hours or days to get to. They can now do in a matter of minutes. So they just fly the drone in, drop it through a parachute, and the drugs are available for administration. Our skill shortage. I mean, research, and we've all seen that. Research has shown that 70% of what we know is through practical experience and through doing our jobs how we learn. Only 20%, and probably even lesser in my case, is learnt in a classroom. So when you have people of different levels of education, it really is hard to do safety critical training in a classroom. So what companies, especially mining companies, and in this instance Kumba, have done is they make use of virtual reality to train people up, to see how they will react in certain situations, and for them to, in a very practical way, get the training before they're sent into the safety critical areas. And then lastly, to overcome the issue of connectivity and poor infrastructure, Envirofer, Paygo Energy, and Coppergas have joined forces to provide people in Kenya and Tanzania with cooking appliances, cooking gas, and satellite-enabled smart meters, where people can they get notifications to say they're running low on gas or they're running low on credit, and then they can, through mobile device, top up their credit, and the gas gets refilled by the companies. So I hope you found that interesting. It's just a whistle-stop tour through very, very practical ways of embracing digital to overcome these issues. I think, for me, it's always nice to look at these things. I think we're all obsessed with the future, where we'll be in 5 or 10 or 20 years from now. But this is happening right now, right today. And I find it really encouraging to see Africa transforming in that way. So I will now ask Vinesh to just take us through that journey of migrating through the maturity curve and what we've done with another client.
So I'm sure you guys are inspired by the innovation shown in pockets of excellence in Africa. So what does the digital landscape look like? Any guesses? Well, we categorize our clients into 4 main groups. The digital novices, those organizations that have got point solutions that help enable them to create certain efficiencies within the organization. These would typically be maybe an overall equipment effectiveness and downtime management solution on the production lines. And an example of a company like this might be Ilovo Sugar. Then moving up the maturity curve, you then have what we call a digital follower, which has now vertically integrated their organization from sales, procurement, marketing, HR, manufacturing, and maintenance. So they would have implemented something like a manufacturing execution system that synchronizes their ERP with their production control systems to increase the velocity of information through their organization, help them make smarter decisions, and provide more efficiencies and business benefits. Further on, we then have what you call the digital innovators. These are organizations that have now gone a step further and now integrated with their adjacent neighbors in the supply chain. So they typically would have machine-to-machine communications with their neighbors. This allows signals for demand and supply to be communicated electronically with very little human intervention, speeding up decision-making, creating more agility, and more customer centricity in the organization. The epitome, obviously, is a digital champion. These organizations have now got end-to-end visibility of the supply chain, meaning from the absolutely end supplier to the absolute end user and everything in between. They have now been able to get complete integration digitally across that ecosystem of suppliers and users. They have got agility, which enables them to produce lot sizes of one economically, in addition to being able to predict, to using demand sensing, what you or I would buy before we even know it. You may have heard the example from a speaker yesterday where he wanted to buy supply chain books, and using Google Prime, Amazon Prime, they then predicted that he would buy the book, and they moved it to the nearest DC before he even placed the order. So this is the kind of organization we are talking about here. A good example in Africa would be Discovery. Bruce Whitfield explained the Discovery story in the transition into democracy and the risks they took, but they have become a digital champion, or the closest we can find in Africa. So, in this audience, knowing this definition, how many of you here would consider yourself digital novices? None. Have we got all analog players here? And any digital champions? Wow, okay. So we've got lots of work to do, but in the next slides, I'll show you what the benefits of being a digital champion is. Now, we conduct biennial research across our client base. This research was released in late 2018, where we surveyed over about 1,200 companies across the globe, 26 countries, including companies operating in Africa. And the results are as follows. You, as a digital champion, you can expect almost 3 times more digital revenue in the next 5 years. And furthermore, digital champions surveyed expect at least 300% greater efficiency improvements and cost reductions than digital novices. So you can see the dividend of being a digital champion is huge, 300%. So, how do you become a digital champion? In the next series of slides, I'll take you through some of the challenges our clients experience, then a typical process we take our clients through, and as Retief mentioned earlier, actually an example of a digital transformation exercise we did with one of our local clients with global operations. So, in our conversations with our clients globally, we find these are the 5 main challenges they experience. There's so much hype about digitalization. The definitions are not clear, hence Retief had to explain it upfront for the contextualization of this conversation. They don't know what technology is real, what is hype, what will work, what won't. Then, the challenge of getting executive support. In my previous slide, I showed you the 300% benefits. How many of you here are struggling to justify your digital transformation with your leadership? Yeah, quite a few of you guys. Yes, this is a real problem. And this is what most of our clients are struggling. So you're not alone, but this is where our research helps. Then, transformation doesn't happen overnight. It is a journey. You need to think to what your end vision is, what your goal is, the intermediate steps, what technologies would you choose, what is the lowest hanging fruit you're going to target first and provide some low value, the proof of values. These milestones, etc., need to be carefully thought through. Then, because digitalization is disruptive, this disruptive word, it affects the entire organization, change management is key. You have to take your people on the journey. Change management needs to start on day 0 of your digital transformation journey. We need to upskill, reskill, cross-skill our people, maybe even relook at the business operating model. Whatever is required to create efficiencies within the organization and take advantage. Now, the key enabler, which is creating all this hype in digital transformation, is the cloud. It allows seamless integration. Nowadays, even very cost-effective integration. However, the risks are inherent. We've heard about all the hacking and the ransomware risks, etc. Hence, cybersecurity is one of the key concerns for our clients, and I'm sure for most of you in this room. So what is a typical journey? We typically would assess our clients against a 4-ecosystem model, which consists of your people ecosystem, yes, people first, your technology ecosystem, your operational ecosystem, and all of these 3 ecosystems then serve your customer ecosystem, the ultimate objective, the value. Then, what we do is, using a digital maturity tool, we have conversations with everybody from the shop floor to the top floor. Ask them what the challenges are, what they think the solutions are. Obviously, everybody's got a different view. Then, we take the team, this diverse group of people, and put them into a room and have a very fun brainstorming session we call BXT, which stands for Business, Experience, Technology. Here, the team is inspired by the latest technology, because you don't know what you don't know. We bring in vendors to show them what the latest and the greatest is. We also have sessions where we show them what good looks like. From our research of over 2,000 companies, we've got a large database for benchmarking different organizations across different industries. Inspired with that information, they then go and refine their thoughts, and we co-create with them, using mock-ups, simulations, etc., what a compelling future vision for that organization is. Because everybody is involved, everybody normally would buy into that solution. Taking that compelling future vision, we then apply benchmarks to it to determine what the return on investment of each of the individual interventions would be. This is then categorized into a roadmap, and that roadmap is normally prioritized according to ROI. We then move to leadership to get executive support and move forward to implementation. Taking a deeper dive into the analysis phase, we first have to determine the key dimensions which we're going to use to assess a client on. In this particular instance, this client was one of our energy, resources, and utilities client, and this is 8 of the 32 dimensions we measure them against. Now, the first 6 may be something that you're familiar with, but have you thought about 7, which is your digital talent and people? Are your people in your organization ready for this digital journey? How many data scientists do you have in your organization at the moment? How many are you planning to hire? These are the kind of questions that need to be answered. Are your people ready to learn? Is it a learning organization? But what about your stakeholders? Yes, your suppliers and your end users. Are they ready to take the digital journey with you? We need to do these readiness assessments to make sure that you are going to be successful. Unless you don't get buy-in from these stakeholders, obviously it's not going to work. So, we take those dimensions and we plot it onto this easy-to-read diagram, where down the middle you can see those gray dots which indicate what the current level of maturity of this particular organization is. The blocks with the green dots show what they currently have in place to achieve their objectives, and the one with red is what they need to apply to get to their requisite state of maturity. So the question then arises, what is the requisite state of maturity? How do you get there? Well, what we do is we've got a leading practice which we benchmark what the objective is. So there's a target outcome, a leading practice from the database of 2,000 people, companies we've taken this trip with over the last 4 to 6 years, and then from there we come up with options for them. Yes, we understand there's capital constraints. There's also time constraints. So how do we optimize it and keep this real? So we would then give them 2 options, the least expensive option with a shorter term return, and obviously a bigger solution which requires a bigger investment over a longer period of time. So typically in the supply chain example, the client wanted a paperless system. And then the leading practice would be planning and optimization tools that are digital. But if the client did not have a requisite capital, we just go for electronic workflow, digitize some documents using optical character recognition, like Retief mentioned earlier, and then implement that solution. However, if the client really wanted to take a long-term view and could get the support for the capital investments over a number of years, we could go for the end-to-end solution and putting in a central control tower to integrate the entire supply chain. So typically, once we've got these interventions to take them up the maturity curve, we then come up with a roadmap of investments that looks like this. On my right, you can see the typical projects. Then they have different levels of where the project stages would be. And then on my right, you then see the investments required. Now, in this particular case, this client decided to spend more than 1 billion rand over 5 years in their digital transformation. And in this instance, the typical return on investment for each of those projects was 2 years or less. Of course, it has to be a short time frame. Technology is evolving so quickly. Your competitors are also at your heels trying to catch up with you. So you need to stay ahead of the pack. Hence, short return on investments also then helps get the executives more confidence in what we're trying to achieve. However, we are also realistic. We therefore have 3 time frames for these investments. What we do now, what we do next, and what we do in future to balance out the capital requirements. So, looking at that, I will just now hand back to Retief, and he'll tell you the value of starting your digital journey today.
Thank you, Vinesh. So as Vanessa said, and we saw quite a few hands in the audience to say, who's struggling to get investment from the CEO or probably the CFO. As operational people or supply chain people, we can clearly see the benefits in those examples I showed you earlier. Very innovative and creative ways of delivering medicines, critical medicines to patients, or overcoming basic infrastructure issues. But the CEO really wants to know, what value am I adding to the company in obviously a more capital or commercial company? What does this really mean? How will my shareholders value the company? So I want to show you a short video. It's only 1 minute long. That show the ranking of the top 15 brands globally in the world. Oops, wasn't supposed to start yet. It shows the ranking of the top 15 brands. Sorry. Starting automatically. I'll go back there. So we can consider this as brand athletics, really. And that's what it looks like. So it's a 400-meter race. As with any world-class race, nothing happens in the first 200 meters, and all the action starts around the last bend. And you'll see it really is a 2-horse race. And yes, spoiler alert, there is a Usain Bolt. And you'll see in the last 50 meters, one of the companies making a mad dash for the line, but unfortunately they couldn't make up for a slow start. And I thought this was fascinating because that shows how the value of companies have changed over the last 2 decades, or how our shareholders and investors have perceived the value to change at least. So let's look at the athletics video. No, it's not starting. We are now approaching the last bend, so the action will start happening. Amazon is not even in the picture yet. Here comes Usain. And here's the last desperate dash for the line. quite interesting. I thought that was absolutely fascinating, and it shows how we as investors or shareholders perceive value. So I know a lot happened in 1 minute. So I made the effort to present or to prepare a highlights package for you. So two decades ago, Coca-Cola was top of the pops, and so they've been for decades before that. Massively strong brand, as we all know. And then we had the usual suspects in terms of technology players. So let's see what happened two decades later. Coca-Cola is still there. Even though you'll see on the next slide, they are in a very challenging industry. Sugary carbonated drinks aren't that popular anymore. So they obviously have headwinds that they're fighting, and we'll discuss now how they're combating that. Microsoft is still there, overtaking Coca-Cola. And then IBM was replaced by Amazon. The interesting bit is Amazon only appeared on that radar in 2014. So in 4 years, they made the top 5. Intel disappeared. And Google came in, I think it's around about 2008. And then Nokia also disappeared and was replaced by Apple. So Apple only appeared in the top 15 in 2011. And 2 years later, they were top of the company. So what it took Coca-Cola decades to build up in terms of brand value, Apple managed to do that within 2 years, and they overtake that. And you could see it almost looked like the others went backwards in the athletics race in relation to how fast Apple was growing. And in the end, it was a two-horse race between Google and Apple, and Amazon, like I said, made a mad dash right at the end. So can anyone notice anything interesting about the companies on that list? You're welcome to shout out. Yep. So most of these have hybrid models, but they do lean towards a certain type of model. On the left, they're mostly B2B companies, right? Even Coca-Cola, depending on your definition of it, you could say Coca-Cola is a B2B company in terms of selling Coca-Cola to the bottlers, you then sell it to the retailers, you then sell it to the consumers. But most of the others are tech companies. Nokia started declining rapidly in 2011, and by 2013 they were off that list. No surprises there. Sean showed us actually quite a few fascinating examples of they're making a comeback in other means in terms of mobile factories and other forms of technology. And then on the right-hand side, you predominantly have B2C companies embracing technology. So Apple, yes, it's a tech company, but it's a B2C company. It's massively technology-driven. Amazon is massively technology-driven. I think we all know all the examples. And then Coca-Cola has just recently approached consumers directly. So they're bypassing the retailers and they open up a channel to consumers directly. And we have a couple more examples on the next slide. So it just shows how the world is changing in quite a short space of time. So at PwC, we do analysis, what we call expectation premium analysis on listed companies. So what that really means is, look, the easiest way of valuing a company is to say a company is worth its net asset value. It means it's just worth what it has in assets. But in every share price, there's an expectation premium, expectation of future value. Or penalty for the ones in white. So we do analysis on it, and then we can more or less accurately estimate what that expectation premium is. It doesn't mean the company's worth that, but for instance, in Clover Industries, it's a different example because there might be a deal soon. But Johnson & Johnson, Pioneer Foods, Unilever, all the others have an expectation premium based on future growth. And there are various factors, but growth is by far and most the biggest factor that drive that expectation of the market. So we took this further and just looked at what technology innovations these companies are undertaking. And we thought these three were quite interesting examples. So Johnson & Johnson just recently partnered with Google to develop low-cost surgical robots. They also acquired a software surgery technology company called OrthoTaxi. Pioneer Foods is migrating to S/4HANA. It's all cloud-based for the ERP system to lay the foundation for their digital transformation journey. And then Nestlé, which is really, as you know, based on net revenue, the biggest consumer products company in the world, has massively digitally transformed their business over the last few years, with the specific focus of opening up a channel to the consumers directly, through personalized messaging, through personalized products and services. Incidentally, the e-commerce sales were 5 times, or grew 5 times faster than the traditional sales channels, and 8% of the global revenue was sold to consumer directly in the last year. So it just shows our companies are now realizing that they need to find different ways of doing business and changing their business models. So this was fascinating. So we're nearly out of time. So let's try and answer the question again. Is Africa ready for digital? And as I said right at the beginning, it's a question that asks for a subjective answer. Personally, I think absolutely. You can already see Africa embracing technologies. It might not be as sexy as what we might see in Asia or in America or other parts of the world, but we've shown very creative ways of using technology to overcome our issues. However, there are a few what we see as critical success factors, and it goes a lot back to what Vanessa said earlier. And these are the 3 top things that we think you need really to have any chance of success. The first one is decisive leadership. Leadership that displays the willingness to experiment and to dabble in the unknown. They will only do that, though, if they understand the business value and the problems you're trying to solve. You're not going to solve a digital transformation journey through technology or telling them about all the cool things you can do in operations. It's really about the business value and about the business problems that you're solving. And that's all based on a robust business case. And that means the onus is on you to make your leaders understand what it is you're trying to solve, what are the investments required, what's the return that you expect, and also the risks involved in that. And that is really of paramount importance to have that support from your leaders. And as you know, with people putting their hands up, it's not an easy thing to do. Hopefully, the brand athletics can help you. I'll send you the link to convey that message. Companies who do crack it and who are successful succeed quite fast, and the return on investment is quite quick, as Vanessa has shown us. What's more important, though, is if you fail, to fail even faster. Companies try too long to fit technology to a problem, and they won't give up, and they spend a tremendous amount of time and money in trying to make something work that's not fit for purpose. The guys who succeed follow an agile approach, really a proof of concept. Try something. If it doesn't work, you move on to something else. There's loads out there that can solve your problem, and they do it in iterative sprints, doing the proof of concept, and then when that happens, and once again the Minesweep example comes up, it opens up new opportunities, and your return on investment just grows with that. And then, as Vinesh also said, your company's DNA will have to change, depending on where in the maturity curve you sit. If you look at our top brands again, they've fundamentally changed the company's DNA and the way they think about the business and the way, especially, they think about the consumer or the end customer. And you have to take people on the journey with you. Not everyone is there yet. Not everyone is even interested or curious about it. But yeah, you can do that through upskilling and educating the people around you, and ultimately you have to change the culture of your company. It takes a very long time, but for some people or some companies it didn't even take that long. But you will find the culture in the company change. And then I wanted to leave you with the quote of the late Alvin Toffler, but Sean's already used that yesterday, but I thought it was so profound that I just wanted to leave it up there again for you to look and reiterate that point. So we've got 2 minutes left. Laura, I promise you we'll do it in time for a couple of questions. All the difficult ones will go to Vinesh, and I'll answer the others. I hope you enjoyed that presentation, and I hope it gave you something to think about, or at least an interesting story to tell someone over dinner tonight about, did you know? And that really was the objective, for you to walk out of here thinking, you know what, it's happening, it's possible, it's not that daunting, and it's happening right here on our shores. Thank you.
Forward one side.
Any questions?
Forward one side.
Anybody? No? Oh,
That's your cue.
where are you? I can't see you. You've got 10 seconds to ask and around 50 seconds.
1 minute 20, Karen.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I just want to ask, in terms of an integrated end-to-end supply chain, how would you convince executives of the importance of an integrated, complete supply chain control tower?
Okay.
Finish you in a sec.
Yeah.
So from my side, it really is about finding that one bugbear, the one big issue in your company that everyone is aware of, right? Because it's not about integrating the supply chain. If you just go to your CEO and present integrating the supply chain to him, you won't get anywhere. It's about that one massive problem that your company is struggling with. It's inherent in your business, and it's been there for probably a very long time. And it's about you finding a creative, new way of solving that problem.
Just to add to that, if you look at the research we did, I can send you the link, or it's on our website. The companies who have got end-to-end integration or digital champions, supply chain integration is 81% of those companies. So that's the benefit. The other benefits are MES is 70%. The predictive maintenance is also around 70-odd%. So our research will back up your case if you take it to your management. Okay.
Okay, and with that, I really must say thank you very much. If you can give them another big hand.
Good.